Pokemon following you is one of the franchise's most beloved mechanics. Yet, unlike the newer games, where the Pokemon's model could be reused in the Overworld 2, Game Freak had to not only create a slew of special graphics just for this feature, but also needed to work around the console's limitations. So, to show some appreciation and learn a bit about this long-standing mechanics history, let's see the beginnings and evolution itself of Pokemon's most adored mechanic. Starting with the first console, I'll go over each generation's attempts at showcasing Pokemon in the Overworld, and mention not only the best and worst standout Overworld sprites, but also some interesting facts about them. Taking a peek inside the game and finding the pool of used sprites, we can see that the game's menu sprites have been reused also for the Overworld, though having more sprites for some of the menu sprites in all directions. Also, 2 of the static menu sprites get reused for items and fossils respectively. As for any standouts, the Rhydon-ish Overworld sprite not only gets the most bang for your buck value by having a more general design that applies to more designs than the rest, but is also the most interesting out of the bunch. If I had to choose the worst one, the Kirby that swallowed a fish to get this form looking water sprite just reminds me a bit too much of the pink little sucker. But it's more of a least best case instead of actual dislike. But since Gen 2 has pretty much everything the same, besides having colors and more Pokemon, let's quickly cover the new additions too. Having the same case as before with Gen 1, the batch of Overworld sprites has many of the game's menu sprites in the pool, while adding 2 new multi-directional Overworld sprites and remaking the Mermaid Kirby form into a Lapras-based one. When it comes to unique additions, the new presence of all the legendaries, much bigger site-specific interaction sprites, and cutscene-based ones diversify the selection just a bit more. A cheap pick for the best is obviously the big boys, but serving Pikachu having its own dedicated slot instead of covering more options is too goofy to not love. It's the complete opposite for Clefairy though, you had your time in the spotlight. But hey, if it weren't for Pokemon Crystal, every legendary beast would still share the same sprite with different bullets instead of their own unique ones. So maybe Clefairy ain't really that bad. Let's see if anything from the Game Boy Advance era beats that though. Finally gaining enough computer power to actually do some unique stuff, from this point on, none of the menu sprites get reused as Overworld sprites. Except Gen 7 for the Pokepelago, but let's keep that hush-hush. Despite having quite the artillery of decorations for the secret base mechanic, which includes a slew of Pokemon too, the options are much more limited and more skewed to the favor of legendaries, if we do the correct thing of not counting the dolls as Pokemon. Either way, besides the fence-sitting legendary picks, the specific Machoke box carrying sprite is pretty cool to see. But seeing a more unexpected pick of Vigoroth doing it makes it that much easier to call it the best. Of course, we can pick Mew as an iconic pick, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. As for the worst, an easy way out would be picking the visibly lacking Overworld Zigzagoon over the superior Professor Birch chasing version, but something about the fact that all the Regis are the same besides their colors rubs me the wrong way. Especially since the colors themselves aren't the most precise either, or because there already exists perfect looking designs for them in the code as dolls, but pretty much are unobtainable outside Japan. Fun. Something similar goes for a few unused Pokemon doll sprites, but besides me also randomly hating on the curliest sprite, due to it being the only one from the line, Fire Red Leaf Green has a similar case of what happened between Gen 1 and 2, using many things from Ruby Sapphire as base, so the slow of new things isn't as big as expected. Having a few unused Overworld sprites itself, despite being in the game, the amount of new sprites and the level of polish is better than before. Having early remnants of the recognizable Heart Gold Soul Silver sprites, the main majority of the Pokémon are solid contenders for the best, like Snorlax being more memorable in this form for some, or the Slowpoke family keeping all the charm of its design, still tightly knit in this point of view. Yet, not all of them are quite the lookers. Fearow looks either completely smushed into a ball with all its bones broken, or a Pidgeotto cosplaying as one. Kangaskhan has had a bit of a tough time by slimming down while trying to find some berries, but Psyduck's cool. Now that we have taken a look at the first two consoles, it's time to take the training wheels off and see what an extra screen and more digital horsepower can offer. Featuring the most amount of changes and additions to the topic yet, and probably ever, Diamond, Pearl and Platinum already hit the ground running with pretty much the last, yet best iteration of the Pokémon dolls, for those who are still counting them, but also laid the groundwork for the games that left the best impression for Overworld Pokémon on most of us in the future with the Amity Square. Allowing only a select pool of 11 Pokémon in Diamond Pearl for needing to have the National Dex first, then all of the stages for the starters later in Platinum, the location is a place that allows you to stroll with your Pokémon to find items, check the scenery, gather berries and accessories upon certain amount of steps, or even to just heal them. But besides this small amount of Pokémon being able to follow you in a dedicated location, the only other real showcase of Overworld Pokémon, besides the ones made for Amity Square, and those same ones reused around the map, and the legendary mythical encounters, are Starly from the intro, Machops in the Orberg Mines, and Magikarps flopping after the explosion at Lake Valor. In other words, pretty much nothing special. But here is my one pick for best and worst anyways. Yet, I'm pretty sure you know that the next entry more than makes up for the slack tenfold. Ramping up the feature that showed promise back in Amity Square, every single 493 Pokémon that were available in Heart Gold Soul Silver had a dedicated front, back, left and right moving animated sprite dedicated to them, even shiny versions too. And since having them be just used for following you around would be too little for the work put in, these sprites also get used for all the Pokeathlon minigames. Speaking of minigames, what are the best worst sprites? Raticate looks like it has a villager nose, and I still haven't decided if it's good or bad. Pikachu brings back nostalgic memories of Pokemon Tower Defense, if you know, you know. But meanwhile, Golduck has the build of a baby zombie with a head bigger than its whole body. Even though I don't care for them, I got to respect them making sprites for all unknown forms in all directions, and shiny versions too. You can't ask anything better than Steelix's sprite being so much bigger than everyone else, but something about Smoochum freaks me out more than just the fact that it's, well, Smoochum. Surskit has never been this cute, and Wailord hasn't been bigger. Even though it's just a cheap pick again, the Weather Trio sprites, being remakes of the ones back in Ruby Sapphire Emerald, is just chef's kiss. Togekiss got flattened by something somehow, and Probopass is unpleasantly staring into my soul. But right at the end I realize that Manaphy is almost one-to-one with its doll from Platinum. I guess my comments had some merit after all. Now, we can keep praising Heart Gold Soul Silver more than it's already been done over the past decade, but there's still one more generation left on this console that may have a place in this race. featuring the most impressive graphics yet, especially when it comes to battles. How do the Unova-based entries follow Johto's act up? Besides the single reused Pikachu and static encounter-based overworld sprites, pretty much all of the new sprites are made for decorating the cities and environments alongside their trainers. Yet, like some may have recalled already, the follow-up of Black 2 and White 2 introduced the Hidden Grotto mechanic, which had an opportunity to grant the player a static encounter. So, combining the new encounter method with a remixed Pokédex, the pool of used sprites now included all direct ports from Hard Gold Soul Silver, while having a good few new sprites also added on top. Now, you may be thinking about why there's all these old sprites in the game, if you haven't actually seen them besides the ones that appear in the grottos. Well, let me enlighten you with a reminder about something that's called the Entraling. Being a feature introduced in Gen 5, which connected the game with a browser-based Dream World minigame, the fourth segment of the Entraling world allowed you to connect and retrieve Pokémon that you befriended in the Dream World, where, of course, the old and new Overworld sprites make their appearance. But besides learning about a feature that hasn't been able to be used due to its shutdown years ago, let's take a peek at the new sprite additions for the Gen 5 Pokémon. Odino, somehow being a perfect replica of the full sprite form, left quite the mark on me, but wondering about how Salt is able to walk, while being so top-heavy did the opposite. Feeling even more emotions by being shocked at how tiny a Molga is, on initially not intended. Klinklang just seems kind of funny when you see the contrast of his wideness when looking from the front versus the side. And might as well keep the tradition alive, the main points of the story's climax cannot go unnoted with their sheer scale and amount of animation that's shown in their sprites. But even though the quality kept ramping up, and all of the Overworld-based Pokémon that appeared had wholly dedicated sprites to them, the amount of effort just kept piling up due to the increase in graphical fidelity and sheer quantity of Pokémon. So, it's no surprise that with Black 2 and White 2, not only there were no more 2D sprites in general, but also dedicated art assets for overworld scenarios greatly decreased. Though that doesn't mean there's no stuff I still want to cover. Despite the Pokémon games not using the 2D sprite-based art style starting from X and Y, I wanted to dedicate this last chapter to overworld shenanigans in the 3D age, since there are still some interesting things to talk about in some games. Mainly just using modified versions of the Pokémon's model for specific events, like Furfrou catching puzzle at the Perfume Palace, Lapras, Rhyhorn, Skiddo, Mamoswine as raid options in their dedicated spots, or options for static encounters like the legendaries, or, well, Snorlax. And I guess count in Corina's Lucarios here too. The reality of the first 3D Pokémon game not having following Pokémon, minigames, or other events with dedicated models in the overworld shouldn't really be a surprise. If they gave stuff like this priority, the final gym leader having only 3 Pokémon would be the least of your complaints. Besides having the same shtick as the original Gen 3 games with the Pokédolls, the only real main special thing is the Machokes carrying boxes again and legendaries for their special interactions. Now, despite them fully starting to use the same models for the overworld that appear in the battles, it was discovered a while after release that there existed unused overworld walking/running animations for all the Pokémon in these games.
Oh, probably just for a select few, like how it was with the Amity Square in Gen 4, right?
Nope, disembodied voice existing solely for the script. Try something like the whole 802 list of Pokémon that existed at the time. Although it may seem rather disappointing that so much effort just got trashed, it most likely was cut due to issues with optimization or bugs that the mechanic would cause. I mean, if my 3DS chugging along at any totem battle didn't say enough already, the game was pushing its limits quite a bit already, so adding following Pokemon on top would have been quite the daunting task. Either way, it's still quite a shame that we didn't see the animations in-game, so why not at least honor them by giving a peek at them now, splitting the walking and running into their own categories. When it comes to walking, Venonat has never been this expressive since the Black-White days. Slowpoke and Slowbro are perfect like usual. We couldn't be any more prouder of Farfetch'd marching. Mop knows how to party. Krabby and Kingler are so simple yet effective. Furtitwalk, Ludicolo knows what's up. Rotom is expectedly chaotic, and that's why we love him. Profarok and Crocodile got swag like no other. Crabrawler, being stands up, is his middle name. And Buzzball is just proving that he's peak once again with the best hero pose ever. As for the worst, Swallow still is snubbed with its stupid gliding animation. Something feels wrong about Gardevoir's green hair and thingies shaking in the wind. Yeah. Cofagrigus literally is just doing its battle pose. This is the only time that the Electros' battle pose would make sense, yet instead we got this abomination. When it comes to running animations, Alolan Sandshrew kicks it off with its Beyblade cosplay. Golem does its best Indiana Jones boulder impression. Mega Kangaskhan's kid, sitting on her shoulder due to not being able to keep up, is so adorable. Ampharos turns out to be a Naruto fan. Wobbuffet has needs that only a restroom can fulfill. Dude's so bulky that his arms have to do the running instead. Slakoth moves as fast as when he's walking, and that's perfect. You see this under the word bliss in the dictionary. Porygon Z, being Porygon Z, finally shows why this form is called Skyform. Ochog deserves this spot, even without bias included. One word, Joltik. One of the reasons why Heliolisk is in my top 5. I guess nothing really can wake Lil Bro up, and Exurkitry is having the time of its life. Without any bad, there is no good, which Alolan Golem immediately proves by still being on his feet instead of rolling. But I guess you can't fully blame it. I guess you can call that running. Corfish missed the memo about running. Tropius suffering from the same thing as Swallow. What is Cofagrigus still doing here? And how does this even work? All in all, most of these got reused for Pokemon that were available starting from the Isle of Armor DLC in Sword and Shield, so it's not a total loss. Still a shame we didn't get to see it. Having the return of following Pokemon be one of this entry's most recognized features, Let's Go's only special function for the Overworld models, besides reusing the ones for battles like every game since Sun Moon, is also creating special interaction-based animations, them mostly being the right Pokemon. Also, since the game introduced Overworld-based encounters, even if they weren't reused and had special models, they would most likely be just used for the following Pokemon models too. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Due to the introduction of Overworld encounters in Let's Go, the need for anything dedicated was removed and instead simplified with the modified battle models from Pokemon Camp being used for Sword and Shield's Overworld, while in Scarlet and Violet you can just battle the Pokemon directly, hence just combining battles and Overworld into one, instead of copying the model for use in both scenarios. Even though there are no Overworld encounters in the game outside of Pokemon Swarms, those exact encounters and the following Pokemon all use identical versions of the models that are in battles, while the previously somewhat passable Pokemon dolls now are just stone statues. Good job, BDSP, you're ending the video by proving that you're the worst once again. But yeah, besides BDSP's bad manners and having the deal with unique models sealed since Let's Go, That does it for our trip down Pokemon's Overworld Sprite History Lane. Or, at this point, Sprite and Model History, but yeah, you get the point. Let me know which generation you think did Overworld Pokemon the best, but besides that, big thanks to the patrons like usual. Check out my Twitter to not miss bangers like this, and stay tuned for more.